The hotel had been abandoned for decades, yet it stood like a frozen monument to another era. Its grand facade, once a symbol of elegance and luxury, now crumbled under layers of dust and decay. Windows were shattered or boarded up, and the iron gates creaked in the wind, a sound that seemed almost alive. Yet, curiosity, or perhaps foolishness, drew me toward it one gray afternoon. I pushed open the heavy front doors. Dust swirled in the weak beams of sunlight filtering through the broken glass. The lobby stretched before me, vast and silent. A grand chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling, crystals dangling and clinking softly in the draft. The faded carpet was torn, and the walls bore peeling wallpaper that hinted at elegance long forgotten. At first, nothing moved. Then I heard it, a faint creak of floorboards, like someone walking above. I froze. The hotel had been empty for years, yet the sound was deliberate, echoing unnaturally through the cavernous space. Shadows danced across the walls, distorted and shifting, and a faint chill brushed against my skin. I stepped further inside. The reception desk was cracked and dusty, registration ledgers scattered, pages yellowed and brittle. Behind it, a mirror reflected the empty lobby, but something was off. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a figure in a suit, standing near the elevators. Then it vanished. My pulse quickened. The hallway stretched on in all directions, dimly lit by shafts of sunlight filtering through broken windows. I walked cautiously, my footsteps echoing unnaturally. Then came another sound, the faint murmur of conversation, hushed voices carrying from somewhere deep inside. I followed the sound, passing elevators with doors half open, revealing darkness beyond. Rooms along the hallway were in various states of decay. Furniture lay overturned, sheets draped over chairs like shrouds, and portraits on the walls stared blankly with eyes that seemed to follow me. Each room I passed whispered its own story, soft creaks of bed springs, the faint hiss of a radiator long broken, even the smell of perfume lingering in the air as if the guests were still there. A sudden noise above made me freeze, laughter. Not faint, not imagined, but clear and echoing through the floors. I looked up the staircase. Shadows shifted across the railing, moving against the dim light. The hotel was alive in its own way. It wasn't just abandoned, it was haunted by memory, by presence, by the lingering souls of guests who had never checked out. I reached the grand ballroom. Broken chandeliers swayed gently, casting fractured light across the walls. Dust motes danced in the air. Then came music, faint, distorted, piano keys playing a melody that should have been impossible without hands. I stepped closer. Shadows flickered across the floor, stretching, curling, as if invisible dancers were performing a waltz. The echoes of long-dead guests seemed to swirl around me, whispering, laughing, watching. A hallway off the ballroom drew me in. The walls here were lined with portraits of past guests, faces frozen in time, eyes wide, expressions blank yet unnervingly aware. My flashlight beam passed over one painting, and for a brief moment, the eyes seemed to blink. I stumbled back. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, layering, as if the hotel itself was speaking to me. Welcome, stay, never leave. I descended a staircase to the lower levels. The basement corridors were damp, smell of mold and rust filling the air. Here, the echoes were sharper, more purposeful. Doors creaked open and shut on their own. Shadows flitted along walls, indistinct, twisting, stretching. Every sound I made seemed to trigger movement elsewhere. Footsteps, whispers, a distant slam. I realized then that the hotel wasn't just haunted, it was alive, reacting to me, observing me, deciding what I should see. In a corridor lined with empty rooms, I heard it again, a faint cough, followed by the soft padding of footsteps. I spun, flashlight trembling, but nothing was there. The sound continued, layered with whispers, faint laughter, and the distant clatter of furniture. The hotel was patient, eternal, watching, waiting. I forced myself to continue, drawn deeper into the labyrinth of hallways, rooms, and staircases. Every corner seemed to hold a new sound, a new movement. Mirrors reflected fleeting shadows that weren't my own. Doors opened and closed with slow deliberation. I felt as though unseen eyes followed me relentlessly, cataloging my every step, my every breath. Finally, I reached the elevator bank. Doors hung open, dark voids beyond. I stared into one shaft, heart hammering, as a shadow moved swiftly across the floor above. A cold gust of wind blew past me, carrying faint whispers that grew into a chorus. Stay, you belong, never leave. My skin prickled, and I understood then that the hotel had marked me. Its presence, its memories, its echoes of guests past would linger long after I left, or tried to leave. I couldn't stop moving, drawn deeper into the hotel's maze of hallways and corridors. Each step echoed unnaturally, layered over the faint creaks and groans of the building settling, or perhaps moving on its own. Shadows twisted along the walls, stretching and bending, sometimes forming shapes that resembled figures walking beside me, just out of reach. I reached the grand staircase that spiraled toward the upper floors. The wood groaned under my weight, and each step seemed to reverberate with echoes of countless guests who had never checked out. As I ascended, a soft glow appeared at the end of a hallway, a flickering light, impossible to trace to any lamp or window. I moved cautiously toward it, feeling a cold draft that carried faint whispers. Stay, stay, stay. The hallway was lined with doors, each slightly ajar. From behind one, I heard a soft rustling, like clothing brushing against the floor. Another creaked open and shut slowly, though no hand had touched it. I approached a room, the door trembling in its frame, and peered inside. A bed had been made neatly, as if someone had just left it moments ago. But the air was thick with cold, and I could feel eyes on me, unseen yet piercing. As I moved through the upper floors, the hotel's presence became more pronounced. Mirrors reflected movement that didn't match my own. I glanced into one and saw a figure standing behind me, a tall guest in formal attire, but when I turned, the room was empty. Whispered laughter echoed through the hallway, layered with footsteps that weren't mine. The building was alive, aware, feeding on attention, reaction, presence. I entered the ballroom again, the grand chandelier above swaying slightly. This time, the music was clearer, piano notes accompanied by soft murmurs, as though a ghostly party continued in some parallel dimension. Figures flickered at the edges of my vision, guests in old-fashioned attire, moving gracefully, their faces pale and expressionless. Shadows danced in time with the spectral melody, circling around me, weaving through the pillars and broken furniture. Moving further, I discovered the guest rooms on the far wing. Doors lined the hallway like silent sentinels. I dared to enter one. The room was pristine, untouched by time, though dust motes floated in the beams of my flashlight. A faint perfume lingered, sweet and cloying. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. My heart raced as I spun, but no one was there. The whispers intensified, forming phrases I could almost understand. Join us, remain, never leave. I forced the door open and fled down the hallway. Shadows seemed to stretch toward me, moving independently of the light. A faint knock came from another room, slow and deliberate. I approached carefully. Inside, I saw a figure sitting in a chair, back straight, staring at nothing. Its head turned slowly toward me, revealing a hollow, featureless face. I stumbled back, nearly falling, and the door slammed again. Descending to the basement, I found corridors that were narrower, darker, and damper. Water pooled on the floors, and the smell of mold was overpowering. Yet, despite the decay, faint lights flickered in the distance. The echoes here were louder, sharper, steps, laughter, whispers, all layered into a chaotic symphony. Doors along the hall opened and closed on their own. I saw shadows weaving through the walls, stretching across the floors, reaching out, almost tangible. At one point, I paused in a hallway lined with mirrors. Every reflection contained not only myself but faint images of other guests, some standing, some seated, some moving subtly in the corners. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow, expressions unreadable. I realized with dread that the hotel didn't just house spirits, it trapped them, looping them into its endless rhythm, feeding off their presence. In the farthest wing, I discovered the dining hall. Long tables still held tarnished silverware, plates coated in dust. Yet, I heard the faint clinking of glasses, the soft murmur of conversation. Shadows flitted along the walls and ceiling, dancing in time with the invisible music. The echoes of long-gone guests overlapped with my own movements, creating a chorus that was impossible to ignore. Suddenly, the chandelier above swung violently, casting fractured light across the room. Shadows elongated, forming humanoid shapes that reached toward me. A cold gust swept through, carrying whispers layered over laughter, footsteps, and the faint scratch of a piano. The hotel was no longer just observing, it was interacting, testing, trying to pull me deeper into its rhythm. I ran toward the stairs, desperately seeking the lobby, the exit, anything familiar. Doors opened in front of me, then slammed behind. Hallways twisted in impossible ways. Every step I took seemed to be mirrored by shadows, by echoes, by unseen figures moving just out of sight. The hotel was alive, patient, eternal, and it had decided I belonged inside its labyrinth. Finally, I reached the main lobby. Dust swirled in weak sunlight streaming through broken windows. Yet even here, the shadows lingered, stretching across the cracked floors, following me. I could hear whispers layered over every metallic echo, every creak, every distant footstep. Stay, remain, join us. I knew I couldn't stay. I had to leave, but the hotel had left its mark. Its presence lingered, feeding off attention, reacting to perception, waiting for the next intruder brave, or foolish, enough to explore its decaying halls. I burst through the grand lobby, heart pounding, lungs burning. The echoes of footsteps, laughter, and whispers pursued me relentlessly, threading through the air like invisible chains. The hotel had marked me, its presence embedding itself deep in my mind. Every corner, every shadow, every creak of the floor seemed alive, reaching, waiting. I ran toward the main entrance. The heavy doors groaned under the wind, as if resisting my escape. Faintly, I could hear the clatter of unseen furniture, the shuffle of feet, and low murmurs from hallways I had already passed. I glanced back. In the dim light, I saw figures, guests, tall and pale, moving slowly toward me. Their eyes were hollow, expressionless, yet undeniably aware. The hotel had animated its prisoners, and now I was in their midst. I reached the doors and pulled with all my strength. They swung open, letting in a rush of cold evening air. I stumbled out into the deserted street, gasping. Behind me, the building loomed, silent and decayed, but I could feel it pulsing, alive, its corridors, rooms, and haunted floors extending beyond its walls, following me invisibly. Even as I fled, the whispers continued in my mind. Stay, you belong, never leave. The hotel didn't just exist in space, it existed in perception, in memory, in sound. Every echo I heard, every shadow I glimpsed, every faint creak of a door could draw it closer. Its hunger was eternal. I ran through side streets, trying to escape the oppressive presence. But the further I went, the more the echoes seemed to reach me. Footsteps that weren't mine, laughter that wasn't human, whispers that carried instructions I couldn't ignore. They layered endlessly, relentless and haunting. The hotel had extended its influence, weaving its rhythm into reality itself. I reached a bridge overlooking the city and paused to catch my breath. The night air was still, the world calm, yet I could feel the hotel's pulse beneath me. It was patient, eternal, waiting. Anyone curious enough to explore would be swallowed into its symphony of echoes and shadows, a dance with ghostly guests that never ended. As I turned to leave, a faint light flickered from a top-floor window. For a brief moment, I saw movement, a figure, standing at the edge, watching, waiting. The chandelier in the lobby below swayed, casting fractured light that seemed to reach out across the street. I understood then, the hotel never truly let go. Its guests never left, and neither would those who dared enter. I ran faster, my mind racing, adrenaline coursing through every vein. The streets became a blur, the city around me mundane yet alien. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, blended with the hotel's echoes, reminding me it was still there, patient, eternal, and hungry for the next visitor. Finally, I reached my apartment, slamming the door behind me. Silence, real silence, for a moment. But even inside, I could hear faint whispers, soft footsteps, the echo of a piano key from the ballroom, a laugh drifting through the walls. The hotel had claimed a part of me. Its echoes would follow, layered and persistent, until attention, curiosity, or foolishness brought someone else to its doors. I sank onto the floor, heart racing, mind unable to shut off the images, the shadowy guests, the shifting hallways, the flickering lights. I realized that no one who entered the old hotel ever truly left. They became part of its rhythm, its symphony of whispers, footsteps, and ghostly presence. I had escaped physically, but mentally, emotionally, I was tied to the building, woven into its eternal song. Even now, I hear the whispers. Even now, shadows seem to move at the edges of my vision. I know the hotel waits, patient, eternal, ready for the next curious soul to step inside, where the guests never check out, the floors remember every step, and the echoes never end. If this story gave you chills, like, share, and subscribe for more abandoned locations, haunted hotels, and supernatural tales where memories linger, shadows move, and some places never forget.